Hey guys, tonight we're setting off on a journey, so quiet, so dusty, and so oddly connective that it might just lull you into the gentlest nap of your life. Picture this, you're standing on the edge of ancient Xi'an, China, around 100 BCE. There's a low sun, warm sand underfoot, and in front of you, a slowly shifting line of donkeys and camels, wobbling under bundles of silk spices, and because nothing ever travels alone, live chickens tied by the legs. This isn't some Indiana Jones caravan chase. No, you're moving at a pace even snails would sigh at. You've got 6 layers of linen wrapped around you. The dust in your mouth tastes faintly of cumin and camel breath, and you've already tripped twice on your own sandals. You are officially a silk routes merchant, an elite traveller, a glorified delivery driver, and whether you know it or not, part of the first ever global information highway. Sure, you probably won't survive this route without at least one bout of food poisoning or a scorpion-related incident, but it's all part of the charm. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're here, post your location and what time you're listening. I love knowing where you all tune in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in Xi'an is dry, but it thrums with motion. You're standing in a public square where traders from China's interior arrive with crates of silk bolts of brocade and carefully wrapped tea bricks. Overhead, flocks of birds trace the sky. Somewhere a bamboo flute is playing the same 5 notes on loop, because even in 100 BCE elevator music was a thing. You load your pack animals with goods tied in neat squares. Your caravan leader double-checks your path, and a local official stamps your permit with the satisfying thunk of imperial approval. You are not just carting fabric, you are exporting prestige. Silk by now is an empire's currency and fashion flex. Everyone wants it, Romans drape it, Persians line their tents with it, and Indian merchants hoard it like it's the 1st century Bitcoin. The Han dynasty treats it as both a trade good and a diplomatic tool. Sending silk westward says, we're powerful, prosperous, and look how fancy our sleeves are. You and your group push out from the city gates where the stone road quickly gives way to packed earth, then gravel, then sand. Your boots fill with it. Your eyebrows collect it. You blink once and now your eyelashes feel like salted parchment. Welcome to trade, but you're not alone. The routes begin to converge almost immediately. From the north, horse traders from the steppes approach with shaggy mares and too many questions. From the south, spice merchants carrying sacks that smell like cardamom and something suspiciously like feet. Still, the traffic flows not just in goods but in people dialects and what scholars call cultural transmission. We're talking recipes, prayer rituals, embroidery patterns, even the latest theories on which bird makes the best pet philosopher. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you. The silk routes weren't a single road, but a vast web of overland and maritime paths stretching from China all the way to Rome, covering nearly 4,000 miles. That's a lot of sand in a lot of shoes. Now, the quirky bit ancient caravans often brought along musicians not for protection, not even for entertainment per se, but because some towns literally charged lower customs fees if you showed up playing music. Think of it as showing up at TSA with a ukulele and getting waved through. Historians still argue whether the earliest Silk Road pathways were government-led or grew naturally out of spontaneous trade. What's more likely? Probably a bit of both. Empires may draw the maps, but it's the merchants, gossipers, and camel whisperers who keep the lines alive. As the first day drags on your sense of time softens, the pace of travel is deliberately slow. At nightfall, the entire caravan forms a tight circle, animals groaning, fires cracking. Someone shares a story about a trader who once crossed the Taklamakan desert barefoot after losing a bet. No one laughs because honestly, it sounds entirely plausible. The stars above are blank and enormous. The road behind you is already being covered by the wind. In the dark, someone snores. Someone else argues in whispers about whether tea leaves can predict the weather. You fall asleep wondering how many of these people have lied about the weight of their cargo. Tomorrow you'll pass through Hekatompelos, an old Parthian city with a name that sounds like a medical condition, but was once a major checkpoint. But tonight, it's just you, the camels, the silk, and the slow hum of an empire stretching thread by thread across the world. You wake up before the sun groggy and wrapped in your own cloak, like an ancient burrito. Around you, the caravan is already stirring camels, groaning like creaky floorboards, traders muttering about saddle straps, and a small fire crackling with something that smells vaguely like barley and definitely like last night's socks. By now, you've left the walls of Xi'an far behind. The road ahead curves along low hills, dusted with dry grass and the occasional half-hearted shrub. In the crisp dawn light, you hear the telltale jingling of bells. Not church bells, not wedding bells, but the tiny copper bells tied to the ankles of donkeys and mules. Why, so you don't lose track of them in the morning mist? Or maybe because even donkeys deserve a little flair. You pass small market towns, each more chaotic than the last. Some a little more than mud brick enclosures, with a single well in the centre. Others have actual shops, low stalls piled with pomegranates, dyed wool, and fish so dry it crunches like a scroll. But the real exchange isn't the goods, it's the chatter. You hear snatches of gossip in Chinese, Parthian, Sogdian, and broken Greek. A man insists that Rome just elected a horse as senator. Another swears by a perfume that makes people fall in love at first sniff. You buy a pouch of almonds and get a whispered warning about a new toll gate popping up 3 towns ahead. You're basically on the ancient version of Twitter, except every tweet involves eye contact and a risk of lice. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Silk Routes didn't just transport objects, they ferried knowledge, religion, and ideas across continents. Buddhism, for example, spread from India to China via these trade networks, and along with it came new philosophies, art styles, and a surprising number of statues that look like they're judging your choices. You stop to water the animals at a well flanked by stone statues, guardian figures. One says, though, they look more like sleepy librarians. A boy selling dyed cloth offers you a bolt of turquoise linen in exchange for 2 bronze coins and a good story. You exaggerate one about your camel outrunning a snow leopard, and he throws in a sprig of mint. And this act of exchange, not just of things but of stuffed meaning, is where the comparison to the internet really kicks in. Because you're not just passing data, you are the data. You're walking it, living it, sweating it frankly. A fringe tidbit. Some merchants trained birds, starlings and pigeons to mimic snippets of spoken language. They were conversation starters, and sometimes even informal message carriers if they could be coaxed to return to specific oases. Imagine booting up your inbox and it squawks your name. You continue west the terrain, flattening out into a pale sea of sand. You travel for hours before encountering a structure that's part shrine, part customs booth. 2 guards, sunburned and squinting, ask what you're carrying and why your face looks like it lost a fight with a dust storm. You trade a bolt of satin and a melon for a stamp on your travel pass. Historians still argue whether this constant fluid trade of stories and rumours along the route was an intentional mechanism of empire or simply a byproduct of movement. Either way, by the time news reached one end of the Silk Road from the other, it had usually changed shape entirely. An earthquake in Persia might arrive in China as a tale of a mountain that sneezed. Night falls again, and you camp near a creek. The group gathers around a fire, where someone unrolls a scroll they picked up 5 stops back. It's a poem written in Persian script, but read aloud in a Sogdian accent, with dramatic flair. No one understands every word, but everyone pretends they do. You're reminded of a piece of gossip from earlier, a woman in Samarkand selling mirrors that show your future spouse. You'll probably forget it by morning, but tonight it seems like the most important headline in the world. The stars blink overhead. Someone's flute is back with those same 5 notes. A camel chews rhythmically beside your ear. You close your eyes, your dreams now threaded with spices maps, and half-true stories retold at market stalls. And somewhere in the dark, someone nearby mutters, "Did you hear? A town near Antioch just banned loud sandals." It's a ridiculous claim, but still, you wonder. By now your legs ache in ways you didn't know possible. You're beginning to suspect that walking across continents isn't as glamorous as it sounds. The The sun is no longer just overhead, it's everywhere, reflecting off sandstone and the broad, unamused faces of your caravan's camels. Let's talk about those camels, your new colleagues, your grumpy four-legged routers of the ancient world. They carry not only your silken spices, but your emotional baggage too. One of them, who you've named Chairman Spitz, seems to harbour a personal vendetta against you. Every time you adjust his harness, he stares into your soul and makes a noise like a deflating bagpipe. Another endearingly named Beans walks sideways for no reason, regularly throwing the whole caravan into a slow-motion traffic jam. Camels, as it turns out, are the ancient internet's infrastructure. Their humps aren't for water, common misconception, but fat storage. Their padded feet are like built-in sand shoes, perfectly suited for desert terrain. And their temperament, let's just say, if a camel had a Twitter account, it would be permanently suspended for passive-aggressive sarcasm. Mainstream historical fact. The Bactrian camel, native to Central Asia and equipped with 2 sturdy humps, was a vital part of Silk Road trade. Unlike the dromedary camel, it could handle freezing cold and blistering heat, making it the go-to model for all-terrain travel. You stop at a watering station carved into the side of a sandstone bluff. The well here is fed by an underground spring and maintained by a family that's been doing this since before anyone remembered who started it. There's a painted wall that marks the level of the water across the seasons, an early analytics dashboard, if you will. Over bowls of lukewarm barley stew, the traders swap more than just supplies. You overhear the tale of a caravan that vanished in a sandstorm 2 years ago, only to reappear on the other side of the desert, weeks later, missing 4 crates and a flute player. The flute player was apparently fine with this. Fringe tidbits: some caravan leaders were known to communicate using drum codes, short percussive beats passed from group to group at specific way stations. Think ancient Wi-Fi beacons powered by pots and sticks. Not especially secure, but effective enough to warn about raids, floods, or you guessed it, camel rebellions. One of your camels collapses with a sigh and refuses to get back up. The solution? Not a vet, not rest, but bribery. You wave a handful of dates under its nose. It eyes you. Then slowly, begrudgingly stands up as if to say, "Fine, but only because you asked nicely and smell like almonds." Historians still argue whether these pack animals were domesticated solely for trade, or if they were adopted earlier for social reasons like meat or milk. Some suggest their status in certain cultures even extended to divination. People would read their tracks in the sand like tea leaves. You try reading Chairman Spitz tracks, but all they say is keep up or don't. The desert opens wide now, golden and rippling, like a sea caught mid-breath. Every now and then you spot the faded remains of previous campsites' burnt fire pits, bits of discarded cloth, the occasional half-buried sandal. It reminds you that these roads are ancient, older than your own grandparents' grandparents could fathom. You're just the latest ripple in a pattern that's been unfolding for centuries. A hawk circles overhead, casting a moving shadow across the sand. Your guide says it's good luck unless it's circling you, in which case you should walk faster. By nightfall, you find shelter in the crook of a canyon shaded by petrified trees and guarded by rock formations that look suspiciously like melted statues. Dinner is roasted lentils and something that used to be a goat. It's not bad, though it pairs poorly with regret. You share your sleeping mat with a pile of wool blankets and an unfamiliar sense of awe. Not just at the road, but at the sheer effort it takes to keep anything, stories, silk ideas moving across a world so wide and so wild. The camels grunt softly in their sleep. Somewhere nearby, someone hums a tune you've never heard and somehow already know. And just before you drift off, you remember you've got to wake up early tomorrow. Beans likes to start walking before everyone's ready. He's helpful like that. You wake to the unmistakable sound of someone yelling at a camel. Again. It's always the camels. Chairman Spitz has managed to untie himself during the night and is now standing triumphantly on a sand dune staring into the sunrise like he owns Mesopotamia. You briefly consider applauding him. The caravan gets moving in fits and starts your group merging with another coming from Kashgar. There's a subtle tension, different languages, different accents, and a quiet competition over who has the dustier boots. But soon everyone's too busy arguing over route conditions to be properly suspicious of each other. Today's landscape flattens into a vast shimmering plain. It's the kind of view that tricks your eyes. The horizon is always just there, never closer, never further. Heat makes the air dance like silk in the wind. Your guide offers you a cloth to wrap around your head, not just for the sun, but for the eyes of the watchers. Yes, watchers, let's talk about the surveillance situation on the Silk routes. Mainstream historical fact. The Han Dynasty, particularly under Emperor Wu, established a network of frontier garrisons, signal towers, and official checkpoints along major trade routes. These weren't just to guard against bandits, they were there to collect tolls, monitor movement, and keep an eye on foreigners. You roll up to one of these checkpoints just past midday. It's nothing fancy, just a stone wall, a gate that's mostly ceremonial, and a pair of soldiers who look like they've been arguing over the same chess match since last week. They inspect your papers, ask you why you're transporting quite so many jars of sesame oil, and nod knowingly when you explain it's for personal use. You pay a small fee, offer the soldiers a few bolts of coarse linen, and in return they give you a stamped tile, a kind of passport that gets you through the next 3 gates. You ask if it comes in any other colours. It doesn't. Historians still debate whether these checkpoints served more as bureaucratic control or soft diplomacy. After all, each checkpoint was also a hub for exchanging information, who was passing through, where they were going, what they were carrying, and most importantly, what they were saying. And the chatter, it was monitored. Caravan leaders were often quietly questioned. Some towns kept scribes just to record the latest trader gossip. If you think modern governments invented metadata tracking well, the Han would like a word: fringe tidbit. Some traders developed codes, rhyming songs, gestures, and even decorative knots in their sashes that helped them share information across borders while avoiding unwanted attention. Want to tell someone that a certain town's market is dangerous without saying it out loud? Just tie your sash backward and sing a lullaby about ducks. The road continues winding through low hills now, and with every crest you see more riders, horseback messengers in livery, couriers in a hurry. A few of them don't stop. They're on official business, imperial scrolls, coded instructions, and in one case a bundle of peaches for a noble's daughter. Because apparently love letters weren't enough. You pause at a lookout post, just a stone tower with a bell and a brazier. If trouble approached, the guards here would light a signal fire, and within minutes a message could spread hundreds of miles via smoke signals and drum patterns. You lean against the cool stone and try to imagine that network lighting up in sequence, like a fibre optic line made of fire and wind. And you realise this road doesn't just connect people, it organises them. From soldier to spice seller, everyone knows their role. Evening comes early in the mountains, the air sharpens, your cloak finally earns its weight. Around the fire, someone tells a story about a merchant who tried to smuggle gold disguised as apricots. He got caught when a guard tried to eat one and nearly broke his tooth. That earns a good laugh, your first real one today. You chew a strip of dried meat and stare into the flames, wondering who else has sat at this exact spot centuries before you. What did they carry? What did they whisper? And if this really is the world's first internet, what ancient post did they regret the moment they sent it? Probably something about camels. You've left the mountains behind now, and the landscape shifts once more. Wide plateaus stretch into the distance, like lazy ocean waves, broken only by clumps of stubborn grass and the occasional startled goat. The wind carries the scent of dust time, and that unmistakable hint of something cooking. Possibly lentils, possibly someone's shoe. You're too tired to ask. Your caravan has merged with yet another group Persian traders, heading east with lapis lazuli and embroidered fabrics, some of which shimmer so brightly in the sun they nearly blind you. Someone brings out a small songbird in a wooden cage, swaying gently as the cart bounces along. It chirps with perfect rhythm, matching the creaking of the wagon wheels. No one questions why it's there. You just assume it's part of the ambience now. This leg of the journey is quieter, almost meditative. The roads are smoother, the pace steady. The mood among the traders shifts from tired bickering to storytelling. Everyone has something to share, some half-truth, some exaggerated anecdote about a storm, a theft, a miraculous escape from a particularly aggressive monkey in Bamiyan. But tonight you're carrying something extra. Tucked into the lining of your pack is a thin scroll of paper written in fine brushstrokes. It's coded, meant for a diplomat 2 cities away. You weren't supposed to carry it, but a friend of a friend insisted. "You're heading that way anyway," they said. "Besides, who would suspect you? So now you're an accidental courier. Congratulations." Mainstream historical fact. The Silk Routes weren't just commercial corridors. They were used for diplomatic correspondence, military intelligence, and even espionage. Many travellers, especially those fluent in multiple languages or from mixed cultural backgrounds, were recruited willingly or not into carrying coded messages. You spend the evening at a caravanserai, an ancient roadside inn that smells like firewood sweat and stewed onions. These rest stops were the Silk Road's version of Wi-Fi cafes. A place to rest your animals, swap goods, swap gossip, and maybe if you're lucky, buy a slightly burnt flatbread. The innkeeper doesn't ask questions, but he does eyeball your boots like he's counting your steps. You nod politely and hand over a sliver of saffron to cover your stay. In return, he gives you a room with 3 walls and half a roof. Luxury. Fringe tidbit. Caravanserais often had scribes for hire stationed in the corners. For a small fee, you could dictate a message in one language and have it rewritten beautifully, sometimes poetically, in another. The translator might also include their own little notes. You might send a letter saying, "Send wool," and it arrives, reading "send wool," or "I may be forced to knit awkwardly." Historians still argue whether coded messages along the Silk Routes were used more by states or by criminal networks. Some say the Han Dynasty perfected scroll encryption with layered ink that only appeared under heat. Others suggest that smugglers were doing just fine with hollowed-out walking sticks and ceramic camel figurines. You try to keep your cool that night, lying under the stars with your scroll hidden beneath your head wrap. Nearby, a man recites poetry about the moon and rice wine. A woman argues with her camel in Persian. You hum quietly to yourself, wondering if the message you're carrying really matters. In the morning, someone steals your water skin. Well, not steals exactly, borrows permanently. You track it down 2 hours later, sitting next to a goat with the world's most innocent expression. The water's gone, but you get the skin back. Small victories. As the caravan pushes forward again, you hear the birds still singing. The trader carrying it says, "It only chirps when the wind is blowing east." "Helps me with navigation," he explains, though you suspect he just likes having a conversation partner that doesn't argue back. Midday heat kicks in, and so do the mirage's glittering pools that vanish as you approach. The group moves slower, your camels dragging their feet, the horizon taunting you with each step. You start composing a letter in your head, maybe something to leave carved on a tree. If you're reading this, please send sandals. By nightfall, you reach a city gate guarded by towers of blue tile and torchlight. The city smells like date soil and wet stone. You're waved through without much fanfare. Either you look trustworthy, or they're just too tired to care. As you unpack for the night, your scroll feels heavier than it did before, but you deliver it discreetly to the man with the jewelled earring and the falcon tattoo. He smiles, doesn't thank you, and vanishes down a corridor. And that's it. No payment, no fanfare, just one more whisper passed along the human web. You fall asleep on a straw mat, thinking not about silk or spices, but about how many of these quiet hands, hidden eyes and fluttering birds made the world feel somehow a little smaller. The caravanserai empties at dawn in that half-chaotic, half-sleepy way that only travelling merchants can manage. Someone spills lentils. Someone else is shouting about a missing shoe. One man is still snoring on the roof, apparently unaware his companions have already left. You roll up your mat, tie your belt, and follow the sound of bells always. The bells trailing your caravan out of the city gates. Today you're not headed into wilderness. Today you're entering what traders call the network core, a high traffic zone, dotted with inns, markets and enough gossip to power an empire. By late morning you've reached another caravanserai a bigger one this time, shaped like a square fortress with high walls and arching doorways. The scent of warm stone roasting meat and old parchment greets you. A boy takes your camel's reins as you walk into the courtyard already crowded with traders from every direction. Inside there's everything you could need, and didn't know you missed water troughs, food stalls, sleeping quarters, even a stable with suspiciously elegant goats. You find a spot to sit, pull out your notebook, well a wax tablet, and look around. Every person here is a thread in the world's most tangled tapestry. Let's get something straight, these caravanserais weren't just places to nap and feed your camels. They were information hubs, genuine proto-internet cafes where messages were delivered, copied, gossiped about, and misquoted with alarming speed. Mainstream historical fact caravanserais were located roughly every 30 to 40 kilometers along major Silk Route paths, about the distance a pack animal could comfortably travel in a day. These inns were funded by local rulers or charitable endowments and served as critical infrastructure for both trade and communication. You overhear a trader from Bactria arguing with a Persian over a delivery of sappanwood. Their dispute is half over price, half over whether sappanwood smells like almonds or wet goats. A translator steps in, translating loosely with a touch of performance. The matter is resolved with laughter and a handshake that takes 3 tries to coordinate. A fringe tidbit in some caravanserais bards were employed full-time, not just to entertain, but to recite the latest news in song. If a courier brought word of war drought or diplomatic marriages, the bard would sing it during supper. So yes, there were literally patch notes delivered in ballad form. You sip on warm wine and nibble dates with a sticky sweetness that coats your teeth. A merchant from Sogdia shares a story about a temple built entirely of old tax records. Another man tells of a papermaker who accidentally invented soap when his ink pot exploded. Historians still argue whether these inns functioned more as neutral diplomatic zones or tools of surveillance. Many were staffed with scribes and informants who quietly kept logs of who stayed, what they carried, and what they said after the second cup of wine. You spend the evening writing a short message to a friend in Samarkand. A local scribe copies it neatly onto fine paper, adds his own polite embellishment, which you suspect translates to "sorry for the delay, the camels were dramatic," and seals it with wax. The message will travel west with a group of Roman traders tomorrow. If all goes well, it'll arrive in a few weeks. If not, well, maybe next season. Before bed, you wander the upper balcony of the inn, looking out over the quiet courtyard below. The lamps flicker with orange light. A pair of children chase each other past bundles of wool and a sleeping mule. From somewhere, a soft melody drifts into the night, and that's when it hits you. You're in the middle of an invisible network, not of wires but of footsteps, ink, conversation, and trust. The Silk Routes were never just about getting from point A to point B. They were a web, and each caravanserai was a node gathering, filtering and redistributing stories like packets of information. Downstairs, someone sneezes so dramatically you think a goat has exploded. Laughter follows. The stars blink awake above the stone walls, and you roll onto your side blanket, wrapped around your shoulders. In your dreams, the road stretches out again. Camels plod, bards sing headlines, and you, somewhere in the middle of it, all keep walking. You leave the caravanserai just before sunrise, when the sky is still bruised with twilight, and the air has that brief, delicious chill that makes you believe for about 7 minutes that today might not melt your eyeballs. The road ahead cuts through open desert, broken only by the odd acacia tree, or the occasional vulture that seems just a little too hopeful. The caravan plods along in its usual rhythm, bells jingling footsteps, crunching camels, muttering their grievances in the language of eternal disapproval. It feels like a normal day until it's not. You're maybe 2 hours into the journey when your guide abruptly raises a hand. Silence ripples backward like a falling domino. Everyone stops. The wind dies, even the camels look vaguely alert, which is saying something. There on the horizon, dust, moving fast. Not a sandstorm, not merchants. Bandits. Mainstream historical fact. The silk routes were infamously dangerous in certain stretches. Bandits, pirates, and opportunistic raiders frequently targeted caravans. Some oases became known less for their water and more for their high robbery rates. Empires tried to provide protection, but it wasn't always consistent or even competent. The caravan kicks into motion. Not quite panic, more like an aggressively uncoordinated group jog. Guards move to the flanks, shields raised. Traders clutch the reins of their camels a little tighter. Someone starts yelling about cursed amulets and dives into a crate of dried fish. You, of course, being both brave and rational, promptly duck behind a saddle and pretend to be cargo. But luck is on your side today. The dust plume veers off, either uninterested in your bundle of slightly bruised peaches or possibly intimidated by Chairman Spitz, who has chosen this moment to glare at the horizon like a disgruntled war deity. You all stop to catch your breath at a cluster of rocks. The merchants laugh nervously, the guards resume looking stoic, and someone finally rescues the man who leapt headfirst into the fish crate. He's fine. Smells very persuasive though. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, traders would intentionally load decoy goods, hollow logs filled with rocks, crates labelled sacred herbs, that were just weeds to distract or mislead thieves. Others paid protection fees to certain local warlords who would guarantee safe passage. Sometimes they guaranteed it in exchange for your goat. Historians still argue whether these kinds of raids were random or part of an unofficial toll system, a sort of rogue taxation. Was it crime or just entrepreneurial extortion? Scholars continue to debate, and honestly, it might have been both depending on the day. By noon you reach the next oasis. It's smaller than expected, just a patch of trees, a shallow well, and a few tents billowing lazily in the sun. But it's a safe zone, and that's what matters. You drink greedily from a cracked clay cup water trickling down your chin. You wash your face, brush sand from your tunic, and sit under a tamarisk tree that hums with bees and the quiet sigh of survivors. Lunch is flatbread, dried apricots, and a soft cheese you suspect was smuggled in someone's boot. You don't ask. You're just grateful it's not the fish from earlier. As the heat intensifies, the caravan rests. Some nap. Others gamble with carved dice. A group of musicians plays softly near the well, their instruments strange and lovely, a bowed string made from horsehair, a drum that sounds like rain, a flute carved from bone. And then the stories begin. One man tells of a friend whose caravan was ambushed, but who escaped by pretending to be a statue for 3 hours. Another claims he once saw a tiger riding a stolen mule. You're not sure if that one's metaphorical or just heavily embellished. Still in the calm after danger, every tale feels sharper, funnier, more precious. You lie back on a woven mat, the sounds of the oasis lulling you into a semi-conscious float. The palm leaves above you sway like lazy ceiling fans. A lizard blinks at you from a nearby rock. Somewhere, someone starts snoring with gusto. It's moments like this that remind you this road isn't just about cargo. It's about connection. Every trader, every guard, every bird in a cage is a living node in this ancient network. Information isn't just flowing, it's surviving despite dust distance, and the occasional bandit with poor timing. As the sun starts to slide west, the caravan prepares to move again. Camels are reloaded, packs are tightened. One merchant insists his dates are missing, and everyone agrees to pretend they didn't eat them. You look back once at the oasis, a fragile dot of life in an endless sea of sand. And then with a sigh and a final jingle of bells, the caravan continues on, further west, further into the tangled threads of the silk routes, and whatever surprises they still have tucked under their sleeve. The sun begins its descent into the hazy afternoon sky, turning the landscape into a shimmering mirage of golds and rust. The heat is less vicious now, more like a slow bake instead of an open flame. Your sandals have become oddly expressive. They flap with every step, announcing your arrival like the world's saddest herald. But you press on. Tonight the caravan is aiming for a town, an actual town with walls and watchtowers and everything. That means a real market, real food. And if the rumours are true, a bathhouse where the water is warm. You haven't been this excited since someone dropped a pouch of figs last week and you were the first to help clean it up. The road is more crowded here. You're passing through a popular branch of the trade network, and it shows. Oxen pull wagons full of copper pots. A group of Buddhist monks in saffron robes travels alongside you, their silence somehow louder than the chatter of the rest of the road. Children run between carts, tossing stones and questions. And then there are the translators. You pass one sitting cross-legged under a fig tree surrounded by scrolls and irritated merchants. His job bridged the language chasm between a Greek fishmonger, a Chinese porcelain dealer, and a woman from Parthia who's trying to sell possibly a very large dog or a very small horse. Mainstream historical fact. The Silk routes pass through dozens of language zones requiring constant translation and interpretation. The Sogdians, a merchant people from Central Asia, became famed as go-betweens, often fluent in multiple languages, and able to navigate both cultural nuance and trade negotiations. And yet despite the talent, things often went hilariously wrong. One merchant asks for soap and is handed a block of salt. Another tries to request camphor and ends up purchasing a goat. The Parthian woman insists her animal is neither, and honestly, you're too polite to disagree. These translation mishaps are more than just funny. They're reminders that the Silk routes weren't sleek or perfect. They were messy, gloriously human. Like an email thread that's gone on too long and includes 3 people who shouldn't have been CC'd. Fringe tidbits. In certain regions, visual aids became common in trade. Merchants carried small models, tiny silk swatches, spice samples, or carved wooden miniatures to help bypass language barriers. One clever trader allegedly carried a puppet that mimed his sales pitch. It terrified children, but it got the job done. Historians still argue whether translation errors led to any significant diplomatic incidents. One theory suggests a poorly phrased trade document may have started a minor border conflict. Another points to a war nearly avoided when someone accidentally offered marriage proposals instead of tribute. That's quite a typo. You arrive at the town gates in the late afternoon. The guards wave you through, mostly interested in the quality of your sandals and whether you've brought wine. The town is a welcome contrast to the open road, narrow cobbled streets, tiled rooftops, courtyards filled with potted basil and orange trees. You're directed to a communal lodging hall above a tea house. It's noisy, it smells of cardamom and ambition. You drop your packwipe dust from your eyebrows and descend the stairs to explore. The marketplace is in full swing. Traders shout over one another. Musicians strum unfamiliar instruments. A boy tries to sell you a painted rock he swears is a magical beetle. You buy it, just in case. In one corner of the market, a man is selling scrolls. Not official ones, personal ones. Letters that have been abandoned, misdelivered, or liberated from careless couriers. He reads them aloud in dramatic fashion, adding flair where it's clearly not needed. Dearest cousin, your camel is not as majestic as you claimed. Beloved father, I have arrived in Merv and so have my fleas. Esteemed lord, I regret to inform you, I have traded your prized horse for soup. You buy one scroll just for the handwriting. It's lovely looping script. You can't read a word of it, but you like the way it feels. Back at the tea house, you sip something floral and bitter, while eavesdropping on a table of Roman sailors, arguing over cinnamon prices. One of them insists cinnamon grows in caves. You almost correct him. Almost. Instead, you lean back, letting the noise of the town buzz gently around you. The Silk routes are alive here, not just in the goods, but in the people, their missteps, their jokes, their gestures. Trade might be the engine, but language is the oil. And sometimes it spills. The next morning you'll be back on the road, but tonight you rest, full belly, warm tea, a scroll you can't read, and a magical beetle rock under your pillow. Just in case. You rise to the clatter of wooden dishes and the faint but unmistakable sound of someone loudly arguing with a rooster. Welcome to morning in a Silk route town. You pack quickly already, sensing the stirrings of another long day ahead. The caravan regathers just outside the city gate, a familiar swirl of traders, guards' camels, and confusion. One man insists he's been assigned the wrong mule. The mule does not care. Today's journey takes you through the foothills of a great mountain range. The road narrower, the air crisper. A small breeze carries the scent of pine and something faintly herbal. A welcome change from the usual perfume of camel breath and sun-dried onions. You fall into pace beside a bureaucrat from Byzantium, travelling east with a chest of official scrolls and the energy of someone who's been stuck in one too many meetings. He's eager to talk about law, about taxes, about a very particular complaint regarding dust quality in Mesopotamia. Naturally, you ask him about paperwork. Mainstream historical fact. By the later centuries of Silk Route trade, especially from the Roman Empire onward, paperwork became a massive part of the process. Customs declarations, proof of origin, travel permits, diplomatic letters, all had to be documented, often in duplicate or triplicate and in multiple languages. And woe unto you if your forms were wrong. He pulls one from his bag, carefully unrolling it, like it's sacred. It's a declaration of silk volume, stamped in 3 colours, countersigned by a man named Theodorus, who allegedly sneezes in ink. The seal is a small annoyed eagle, very official. You show him one of your own travel passes, a tile marked with the stamp of a Western magistrate. He squints. Wrong ink, he says with a sigh. Technically valid, but you might be detained for clarification. You try not to let your heart rate rise. Clarification is the Silk Routes version of we need to talk. Fringe tidbit. In some places, traders would hire form whisperers, scribes who specialised in making documents look extra authoritative. They added flourishes, wrote in deliberately obtuse language, and occasionally invented entirely fictional departments just to slow down border inspections. One such title, Senior Supervisor of Caravan Harmony and Ox Reconciliation. You arrive at a toll post by midday. It's not imposing, a simple wooden gate flanked by guards with sunburned noses and impressive moustaches. They ask questions. You answer politely. The Byzantine bureaucrat steps forward and presents 5 scrolls, a map, and a dried fig. The guard waves him through instantly. Apparently figs work. Historians still argue whether this explosion of Silk Route paperwork was a sign of increasing state control or increasing trader savvy. Was bureaucracy strangling commerce, or simply giving it a stage to perform? There's no clear answer, but there's definitely a lot of scrolls. The road widens after the checkpoint, tracing the edges of a mountain stream. You pause to refill your water skin and watch the fish dart between the rocks. Nearby, a group of children offers to recite your trade route in song, for a small fee, of course. You pay in dried apricots. They sing off-key but with great spirit. That night, you camp on a bluff overlooking the valley. The bureaucrat shares his fire, his inkpot, and a deeply philosophical debate on whether goats should be taxed based on weight or stubbornness. You side with stubbornness. It feels more honest. As the flames crackle, he confesses a dream of retiring to a quiet town near Antioch, where he'll open a school for form writing and teach the art of intentionally vague phrasing. You nod, genuinely impressed. That's ambition. Nearby, a man sings lullabies to his donkeys. Another mends a broken sandal with a piece of parchment. You're tempted to offer your own scrolls as backup footwear, but remember the warning about clarification. You drift asleep under a sky so clear it feels painted. Somewhere a goat sneezes. And you dream of seal stamps and a room where no one ever loses their inkpot. You wake with ink on your fingers. At some point during the night, you must have rolled onto the Byzantine bureaucrat's scroll pouch. One of the forms now has a perfect imprint of your ear. You discreetly tuck it back under his satchel before he notices. A crime of sleep, if anything. Today's stretch takes you downhill, the terrain gentler, the air warming again. You pass wild fig trees grazing goats with judgmental eyes and a peddler selling boiled eggs dyed with saffron. You buy one out of curiosity. It tastes yellow, but the real treasure lies ahead. You're entering a town known for its textiles, a place where threads are not just woven, but whispered over, where every bolt of cloth tells a story, and every market stall looks like it could collapse under the weight of its own drama. Mainstream historical fact. Along the Silk Routes, textiles were more than clothing. They were currency status symbols and cultural signposts. Silk from China, wool from Persia, cotton from India, and embroidered linens from Egypt all passed through these markets. Some patterns even served as tribal or political identifiers. The streets here burst with colour, indigo, crimson, saffron, and a green so bright it should be illegal. Fabric is everywhere, hanging from balconies, draped across stalls, even used as makeshift curtains in bathhouses. Children play hide-and-seek beneath yards of satin. A cat lounges regally on a pile of brocade, utterly uninterested in commerce. You pass a stall selling garments woven with silver thread. The merchant insists they protect against both cold winds and betrayal. You ask if they come in a less haunted ghost prince shade. He offers you beige. But the cloth isn't the only thing moving here. Stories are stitched in too. One woman displays shawls embroidered with folk tales, flying horses singing wells, and clever weavers who outwitted emperors. Another trader shows you a bolt of silk dyed in a technique said to be invented by a monk who dreamed in colour. His nephew claims the monk still dreams and charges a fee to hear the latest vision, a fringe tidbit. Some textiles acted like social media. In certain nomadic cultures, young women would weave symbols into their garments that indicated if they were single, betrothed, or looking for a better caravan. It was like updating your relationship status via scarf. You spot a cloak embroidered with a golden falcon, the same design used in a seal you saw stamped on a scroll 2 days ago. You make a note of it. Patterns here don't just decorate, they communicate. Wearing the wrong motif in the wrong region could result in awkward questions or in rare cases awkward duels. Historians still argue whether certain cloth symbols were standardized across empires or evolved independently. Some suggest a sort of ancient textile dialect, where designs had local meanings that shifted slightly with each region, like accents in fabric form. You follow a narrow alley to a quieter courtyard, where older weavers sit on stools, hands moving like practiced music. They don't speak much. Their eyes track your steps, and one offers you a strip of woven ribbon, a gift, she says, for travellers who walk slowly enough to notice things. You tie it around your wrist. It smells faintly of rosewater and wood smoke. Nearby, a troupe of performers sets up a cloth backdrop and begins a puppet show. The story is familiar. A hero, a camel, a long journey, a map drawn in the stars. But this time, the camel wins. The crowd cheers. You find yourself laughing, then wonder how many cities this same tale has travelled to. How many variations exist. How many puppets have worn the same stitched smirk. By evening, the market starts to fold itself away. Stalls of covered bolts of cloth return to crates. A woman pulls down a curtain dyed with crushed beetles and whispers a blessing into the folds before packing it. You suspect she does this every night. Back at your lodging, you shake dust from your sleeves and find a small piece of linen tucked into your pack. It's hand-stitched with a pattern of stars. Your route may be a message, or just someone's way of saying, I saw you dusty and tired and thought you could use a piece of sky. You press it flat, fold it carefully, and slide it into the pages of your notebook. Tomorrow you'll be on the move again, but tonight you sleep beneath a ceiling of stretched canvas warm, air rustling its seams. Your dreams woven from silk and silver threads that whisper stories only you can hear. By dawn, the textile town is already unravelling behind you. The road beckons its edges lined with poplar trees that flicker like matchsticks in the breeze. You adjust your pack, tighten the ribbon around your wrist, and fall into step with the caravan, once more now noticeably quieter, as if everyone's still carrying fragments of last night's stories in their heads. The morning is cool and bright. Your first stop today, a small herbalist station rumoured to have a cure for nearly everything, except sunburn, which is unfortunate because half the caravan now looks like boiled tomatoes with opinions. Let's talk about medicine, or more accurately, medicine. Mainstream historical fact. Along the Silk Routes, medical knowledge flowed just like trade goods. Chinese pulse diagnosis made its way west. Indian Ayurvedic practices travelled east. Greco-Roman surgical techniques were passed along in scrolls and sometimes misunderstood terribly by overeager apprentices. The result was a fascinating, often chaotic blend of ideas, herbs, and questionable confidence. You reach the herbalist compound by mid-morning. It's a simple building, mud brick walls, straw roof, and a drying line of what you hope is medicinal moss. A woman greets you with a nod and waves you into a shaded room, lined with baskets, pots and scrolls. She speaks a mixture of languages, but mostly gestures, and her assistant translates with theatrical flair. Your caravan mate requests something for stomach pain. He's handed a bundle of leaves, a blue stone, and instructions to hum softly while chewing. You ask for a remedy for cracked feet, and are given a jar of green paste that smells like pickled dreams. Fringe tidbit. One Central Asian remedy for migraines involved rubbing the forehead with fermented garlic and wrapping the head in camel wool soaked in vinegar. Whether it worked is unclear, but it certainly made you unpopular at dinner. You browse a wall of ancient remedies. Some are recognisable ginger, turmeric, licorice root. Others are not. There's dried frog skin, powdered seashells, and something labelled night monkey eyebrow, which you're fairly sure is a prank. Outside, two travellers argue about the proper use of rhino horn. One insists it's a cure for fevers. The other says it's best ground into tea and used for confidence. Both are wrong, but neither cares. It's less about science and more about belief, comfort, and tradition. Historians still argue whether these practices should be considered effective medicine or cultural placebo. Some point to modern pharmacology tracing roots back to these very mixtures. Others highlight the lack of controlled testing and the alarming frequency of trial by enthusiastic error. You step outside and find a quiet spot near a patch of wild thyme. A travelling monk from the Kushan Empire offers you a piece of candied ginger and quietly recounts a tale of a healer who once saved an entire caravan by noticing that their camels were licking a specific bush. She brewed tea from the leaves and cured everyone's fever. The bush, later identified as a mild laxative. Success has many faces. Later, you share lunch with a group of North African traders who carry small bundles of dried herbs sewn into their clothes. They believe these bundles protect them from illness, evil spirits, and poorly seasoned food. You're skeptical, but your own stew could use some protection, so you keep your opinions to yourself. A Persian healer travelling with the group shows you a pouch filled with charred bones. For protection, he says, or grinding into powder. Depends on the day. There's a strangely democratic energy to medicine here. Everyone contributes. No one entirely agrees, and somehow it all balances. You begin to realise that healing on the Silk Routes wasn't about perfect science. It was about shared stories, remembered remedies, and trying not to die too dramatically. That night, the campfire glows with soft amber light. Someone is heating stones for a foot soak. Others are rubbing mysterious salves on joints and quietly pretending not to scream. You lean back, listening to the low murmur of advice being traded between generations. A woman teaches a child how to crush dried rose petals into soothing powder. A man recites the pressure points of the hand like a lullaby. Somewhere, a goat chews thoughtfully on a scroll labelled Essential Healing Oils. You fall asleep under the stars, your cracked feet wrapped in green paste, your breath filled with the scent of mint smoke, and a hope that maybe, just maybe, the world will wake up a little less sore in the morning. You wake up feeling better. It's hard to say whether it was the green paste, the candied ginger, or the mint-scented air, but your feet no longer feel like they're auditioning for a role in a tragedy. A rare morning victory. Chairman Spitz seems disappointed. He's clearly grown fond of watching you limp. Today's road cuts through older settlements, villages that sprouted beside the route, like polite interruptions. Each one has its own quirks, a unique way of baking bread, a local tale about a haunted well, and in one case, a statue of a horse, so disproportionately sculpted that everyone agrees not to talk about it. You find yourself walking beside a map maker, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, a permanent squint, and a laugh like a creaking door. He's heading to an archive in the west to trade his newest scroll, a sprawling map drawn on pressed bark and painted in dyes he brewed himself from berries and beetles. Mainstream historical fact. The Silk Routes weren't just used for trade, they also carried cartographic knowledge. Maps were copied, updated, debated, and passed along, gradually shaping regional understandings of the world's shape, features, and limits. Though wildly inaccurate by modern standards, these maps were essential tools for travellers. This particular map maker believes in embellishment. He points to a wavy symbol near the coast and says, "That's where the sky touches the sea. If you sail too far, birds refuse to follow." You nod solemnly. It seems rude to disagree with a man who paints oceans with crushed sapphire and tears. You pause at a roadside shrine, little more than a stack of stones, and faded cloths fluttering in the breeze. Travellers leave offerings, buttons, coins, even poems scribbled on leather. You add a small embroidered scrap from the textile town. Not for luck, just to be part of the pattern. Further along, you pass a caravan heading the opposite direction. They carry scrolls ink and bound volumes. Not silk, not jade, just ideas. They're part of a scholarly mission from a desert monastery. Their leader, an elderly woman with a staff taller than she is, explains that they've been mapping stars, collecting proverbs, and translating stories from lost languages. One of her scribes shows you a page from a recent translation. It's a tale of a talking deer who teaches arithmetic to villagers. You're halfway through reading it before realising it's also a recipe for lentil stew. Multi-purpose literature. Fringe tidbit. Some Silk Route maps included myth zones, regions marked not just with terrain but with warnings like "Land of Laughing Spirits" or "Here be stone wolves." These weren't meant to mislead. They were placeholders for the unknown, the unseen, and the unprovable. You climb a ridge by afternoon and look out over a vast, shimmering basin. From here, you can see the road ahead, winding like a thread through scattered settlements, clusters of tents, and the occasional patch of cultivated land. It looks almost organised, almost. Beside you, the mapmaker sighs. "It always looks simpler from above," he says. "Down there it's all arguments about goats and who stole whose salt." Historians still argue whether early maps along the Silk Routes were meant to be practical navigation tools or ideological expressions, representations of the known world as imagined by whoever held the pen. Some maps show rivers bending in impossible loops or cities floating on clouds. Others mark real paths with stunning precision. As the sun begins to sink, the mapmaker invites you to help him update one of his scrolls. You mark a cluster of trees near a bend in the road, then doodle a camel beside it. He approves. Dinner is boiled barley and dried apples eaten in near silence as travellers review their notes and swap tales of roads they've yet to take. The elderly scholar reads aloud from a journal describing a land beyond the mountains where people wear mirrors on their hats to confuse the sun. No one questions it. You lay back on your mat, stars blinking to life above. Someone has tied ribbons to a tree branch nearby. They flutter in the dark, each one a prayer, a wish, or maybe just someone marking that they were here, however briefly. Your fingers still smell faintly of ink and spice. The mapmaker sleeps curled around his scrolls. Chairman Spitz snores, and you somewhere between myth and measurement drift off thinking maybe the road doesn't need to make perfect sense. Maybe it's enough just to follow it one wobbly step at a time. You wake to the sound of humming. Not a tune exactly, just the steady resonant murmur of voices carrying through the camp. Someone's grinding grain. Someone else is reciting a prayer. Chairman Spitz is glaring at the rising sun like it owes him money. Today the caravan prepares for a rare treat, a formal invitation to dine with a noble household. Apparently, your caravan has acquired a note of passage from a well-connected trader who married into a minor Persian dynasty. The family estate lies just off the main road, a cluster of lush courtyards, perfumed gardens, and suspiciously decorative guard towers. You walk through olive groves and date palms, following a winding path paved with smooth black stones. At the gate, servants greet you with trays of water scented with rose petals. One camel drinks directly from a bowl before anyone can stop him. No one says a word. Mainstream historical fact. Along the Silk Routes, nobles and regional powers often hosted caravans as a form of diplomacy, alliance building, or sheer curiosity. These dinners were not just meals, they were events. Information was exchanged. Marriages, proposed treaties, whispered into bowls of stew. You're ushered into a marble courtyard with a fountain shaped like a lion sneezing into a basin. Cushions are arranged in loose semicircles. Tables are low laden with covered dishes that steam and shimmer. It's the kind of setting where eating with your fingers feels like a delicate art rather than a desperate choice. The noble family appears graceful, composed, and clearly well fed. Their robes shimmer with embroidered falcons, crescent moons, and curiously, a tiny camel in gold thread. You suspect they know how to win over a trade delegation. The meal begins with sweet wine and something that looks like candied peacock, followed by rice, scented with saffron roasted lamb, and flatbreads so thin you can see the moon through them. You try not to inhale your portion too quickly. It's hard. The conversation, as expected, begins with small talk, weather patterns, banditry rates, recent gossip about a nearby prince who tried to invent his own musical scale. It was reportedly unlistenable. Then the subtle questions begin. Where is your caravan headed? What markets are most active? Has anyone else recently passed through with particularly shiny silks? You're careful in your answers. Polite, vague, peppered with flattery. One wrong word and you might redirect a trading war without meaning to. Or worse, lose your place in line for dessert. Fringe tidbit. In some noble courts, seating order at banquets doubled as a code for political alliances. Being seated near the fountain, you're a trusted confidant. Far corner by the fig tree, you're tolerated. Assigned to eat standing by the goat pen. You've made some choices. Historians still argue whether these meals were effective diplomacy or elaborate pageantry. Certainly many records exist of trade routes shifting after a single dinner. But just as many suggest that most nobles mainly use these events to show off their chefs and insult rivals through dessert metaphors. After the main course, music begins a trio of lutes, a reed flute, and something that might be a harp or a weapon depending on the angle. Dancers perform a slow swaying routine about the story of a clever merchant who tricked a mountain into moving. The metaphor is unclear, but the footwork is excellent. The noble hosting the evening leans over to show you a painted scroll, an illustration of his family's lineage, which may or may not include a phoenix. He points to one ancestor and whispers, "He once sold a single bolt of silk for a ship." You nod approvingly. You once traded a broken sandal for a date, so you understand. As the night winds down, the guests receive parting gifts, small bundles of saffron-carved tokens bearing the family crest and, in your case, a scented handkerchief with what appears to be a tiny map embroidered into the corner. A hint, a warning, a fashion choice. You fold it carefully and say nothing. Back at camp, the caravan buzzes with quiet retellings of the evening. Everyone has a different version. Some say the dessert contained gold flakes. Others swear the soup made them temporarily fluent in Armenian. You sit beside the fire, still full, still curious, the embroidered map in your lap. Chairman Spitz tries to eat it. You swat him gently and promise to find him a fig tomorrow. Above you the stars stretch like silk threaded across the sky, pulled tight, glittering. And you wonder how many dinner tables, how many stories, how many impossible feasts this road has seen. You wake late by caravan standards anyway, which means the sun is already up and someone is frantically searching for a sandal they insist was stolen by a monkey. The monkey is currently asleep on a wagon and unwilling to comment. Today's leg of the journey is quiet, uneasy even. There's a shift in mood that drapes over the caravan like a veil. Fewer jokes, fewer songs. You sense it's not fatigue, it's tension. Something about the stretch ahead feels charged. And then you hear it. Silk. Not rustling, not flapping in the wind, whispering. You pass a group of traders huddled near a crate wrapped in black cloth. They lean in, voices low, their eyes darting like sparrows. What's inside? Silkworms. Not the thread, the source. Mainstream historical fact. For centuries, the process of making silk was one of China's most guarded secrets. The export of silkworms, or their eggs, was strictly prohibited under penalty of death. Yet eventually, through espionage, smuggling, and the irresistible pull of profit, the secret did get out, changing the course of fashion and commerce across continents. You inch closer, pretending to inspect your camel's hooves, which earns a contemptuous snort from Chairman Spitz. The crate is small, padded with mulberry leaves, and emits a faint earthy smell. Inside several silkworm cocoons, pale and precious. The trader guarding them glances at you, then shrugs. You didn't see anything, he says, and if you did, it was raisins. You nod, raisins, of course, a fringe tidbit. According to one enduring legend, a Chinese princess smuggled silkworm eggs out of the empire by hiding them inside her elaborate hairdo tucked beneath pins and veils. She carried them all the way to the Persian court where she revealed the secret in exchange for marriage and a very fashionable legacy. You cross paths with a pair of Buddhist monks carrying scrolls on ethical trade. One notices the hushed whispers and raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Morality, like silk, can be folded in many layers. Historians still argue over which empire first cracked the secret of silk independently and which stole it. Was it the Sogdians, the Persians, or even Roman envoys in disguise? Some sources suggest it was a gift of diplomacy. Others insist it was stolen in the quietest of heists. No swords, just silk. As you walk, you begin to notice the other smuggled things. Scrolls concealed in saddle linings, exotic seeds hidden inside candied fruit, even live parrots, posing as decorative scarves. One man is very confident that no one will question his feathered scarf as long as it stops talking. It does not. You arrive at a riverside town that seems too quiet for its size. The guards at the gate are polite but watchful. You're told to keep moving, no lingering. There's been an incident, someone whispers. You don't ask. Instead, the caravan follows the road along the water's edge. Boats pass slowly, their sails stitched with clan symbols and bright dyes. One boat carries barrels of wine, another goats, who bleat with suspicious coordination, as though rehearsed. Dinner that night is subdued. No musicians, no firelight stories, just bread olives and thoughts heavy with secrets. You sit alone, turning the events over in your head. Smuggling, secrecy, stolen worms. This network of trade is also a network of desire, not just for goods, but for knowledge. And like all networks, it leaks. You remember the embroidered handkerchief from the noble's feast. You unfold it again. That corner design, it does resemble a river. The same river you followed today. Is this a map? Is it a warning? Is it just very stylish embroidery? You tuck it back into your pouch, unsure whether to be thrilled or mildly concerned. The wind picks up as the caravan settles for the night. In the distance, frogs croak from the riverside reeds. Someone coughs. A dog growls at a shadow that might be a tree. Chairman Spitz lies down next to you, uncharacteristically gentle. You scratch behind his ear. He grumbles but doesn't move away. And as you drift towards sleep, you can't help but wonder how many other raisins are travelling this road. How many secrets ride in crates and cloaks, in clever lies disguised as trade. Because on the silk routes, nothing spreads faster than a whisper, except maybe the silk that carries it. The final leg of your journey begins before dawn, in that bluish-grey hush when even the camels are too tired to complain. You pack your things fewer now, somehow, even though you've gained stories, maps, ribbons, and at least 3 new opinions on goats. The caravan is quieter today, not sombre but reflective. You've travelled far from the bustle of Xi'an to the music-filled inns of Sogdia, across deserts, rivers, and borders both visible and whispered. And though you're still many miles from the Mediterranean, you feel something nearing its end. You walk along a ridge that overlooks a vast valley. Below you see the glint of tiles rooftops of a city that's whispered of in scrolls, and spice market rumours, Antioch. Traders speak of its libraries, its layered languages, its streets paved with laughter and schemes. It's a place where caravans like yours are both expected and forgotten part of the eternal shuffle of goods, voices, and time. Mainstream historical fact cities like Antioch, Constantinople, and Alexandria acted as vital western termini of the silk routes. Here, Eastern goods were funneled into the Roman world, repackaged, rebranded, and often mythologized. A roll of silk might be sold as the divine threads of a phoenix. A cinnamon stick might become proof of a dragon's diet. But first you must arrive. The road down is steep and the air changes, with every turn, pine to jasmine to hot stone. You pass a column of Roman soldiers, on patrol, their armour gleaming, their faces sunburned and unimpressed. One of them eyes Chairman Spitz and mutters something about ugly horses. Chairman Spitz spits in perfect silence. At the city gate, a scribe records your arrival. He asks your name, your country of origin, and whether you're carrying any spiritually reactive textiles. You say no, but he winks and stamps your pass anyway. Inside Antioch is a storm of marble and mosaic. Every building wears a different accent. You see Indian traders arguing over rent, a Greek pharmacist advertising authentic Chinese headache cures, and a Nubian jeweler selling lapis amulets shaped like birds you've never seen before. You navigate the city with a kind of quiet awe. Everything here is familiar and foreign, a culmination of all the fragments you've gathered along the road. You sit beneath an archway near a tiled fountain and take inventory, not of your goods, but of your journey. A ribbon from the textile village, a scroll copied by a monk, a handkerchief embroidered with directions, or perhaps just flowers, one wooden beetle that might be magic, and a memory of a bird that sang in perfect rhythm with the desert wind. Fringe tidbit traders in ancient cities would often hang symbols outside their lodging places to indicate what languages they spoke or what gods they honoured. A red knot meant they were fluent in Sogdian. A blue stripe meant they didn't haggle after sunset. Some signs, like a carved fish with wings, had meanings long forgotten even then. Historians still argue whether these ancient cities truly understood the scope of the network they were part of. Did they see the threads that stretched from China to Rome? Or did they just enjoy the spices, silks and stories? You spend your last night in a quiet inn, run by an elderly woman who speaks 5 languages and cooks in 7. She serves you stew, offers no small talk, and hands you a small packet. As you leave for the road back, she says, it smells faintly of cinnamon and cedar. You sleep on a cushion by the window. The moon filters through gauze curtains. Somewhere in the city, a storyteller begins his tale of a trader who walked from the edge of the world to the heart of empire, carrying nothing but silk and secrets. He sounds familiar. The journey slows now. The markets grow quiet. The fires dim. The road once so full of motion and noise stretches behind you like a ribbon unspooled across time. You've walked through valleys and across deserts, not just with camels and caravans, but through the currents of history itself, one step at a time. You've touched silk that once lined the robes of emperors, heard stories whispered across mountains, followed maps drawn in ink rumour and the patient hands of 1,000 travellers before you. You've eaten dates under the stars and traded nods with strangers who knew your path without ever asking your name. And now, with your satchel a little lighter and your mind gently full, it's time to rest. Picture the last campsite, quiet, tucked beneath the shadow of a hill. The fire has gone to embers. The wind is soft. Chairman Spitz finally has settled down, beside you content and snoring like distant thunder. The stars blink overhead, ancient as the road itself. You are warm, safe, and just for this moment still. Let the images of trade routes and quiet cities fade now. Let the rhythms of hoofbeats, scrolls, and soft songs dissolve into the hush of sleep. You've arrived. You've always been arriving. And as the last whispers of the silk routes drift into your dreams, know this. The journey continues tomorrow, but tonight, you are home.